This program is designed to provide general information with regards to the subject matters covered. This information is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, sponsors, or station are engaged in rendering any specific and personal, medical, financial, legal, counseling, professional service, or any advice. You should seek the services of competent professionals before applying or trying any suggested ideas. Magazine publisher and entrepreneur Judith Mancini is sharing captivating conversations with experts in their field about the latest trends in our ever-changing world to help you become healthy, wealthy, and wise. Judith Mancini Today will spark your interest and inspire you to lead your best life ever. And now, here's Judith.
Judith Mancini Today is sponsored by Basic Brands, Inc., providing the highest quality specialty products in the natural food industry. Visit basicbrandsinc.com and enter JMT15 for your 15% discount on your first order, including their best-selling Vitamin E ointment, which helps restore moisture and elasticity to your skin. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today on Judith Mancini Today. And the reason it is Judith Mancini Today is because I'm trying to keep you updated to what is happening today. So the first thing I want to talk about is what's happening in 6 days if you count today. Yes, there has been some early voting. This is a very important election. This is the midterm election when we put people into Congress, extend their stay there or end their stay there, put new people in, and what happens locally in your states and local counties, etc. Whether you like what's going on or don't like what's going on, if you want to change it, there's only one way to do it, because we are still a democracy. Even though one party is trying to blame the other that there is no democracy in our republic, this is not true. We are having free elections. It is not up to our country to be interfering in other countries' elections. Neither is it legal for other countries to be involved in our elections. You are the only one that should say who is in office. You should not believe fake news. You should not believe misinformation. And I'm talking about COVID information, democracy, rioting. For some reason, all the rioting a little while ago, a couple of years ago, where they burned down police stations with police in them, when they tried to burn down one of the oldest churches in the United States, none of these people have been held accountable. Now, some people are trying to say that the Republicans sent that person in to harm the Pelosi's. Don't believe everything you hear. Believe the good in people. We don't do things like that in this country. Yes, people are rioting and all of that. That's because there are people in office who do not listen. And they're the people of the same party rioting, causing people to lose their lives, to lose their property. There is a real threat to the democracy in our republic. Remember, go back to your history lessons and see what we are. We are the United States of America, a republic under God. I want you to look that up. I want you to educate yourselves, and I don't want you to be a follow the sheep person just because some of these people are telling you misinformation. I want you to study this election. I want you to ask yourself, are you better off today in the United States than you were a few years ago, meaning 2 or 3 years ago? Did you have inflation at this rate? I don't think so. This is worse than it's ever been in my entire life. My daughter went to the store yesterday, and she had just returned from an appointment for her oldest child, 8-year-old, for an orthodontic appointment to see if he needed to correct his bite and all. Now, she wanted to give him a treat, so she went into the produce department of a local store, and he got to choose what he wanted. So he chose dragon fruit. Now, dragon fruit is an exotic fruit, and not everybody has tried it. Not everybody would want to try it because of the name and how it looks. But it is a fruit, and many people love it, as do I. It's different. And he got some seedless grapes. Seedless grapes are grown in California, all right? I already told you a story about how we were in Mexico, and all the grapes were grown in Mexico, except for the seedless red grapes, which were grown in California. So there's a reverse product swap going on between our two countries. So that was the only thing she bought, one dragon fruit and one bunch of red seedless grapes. And you know what her bill was? $20. She was so in shock, she called me right away, getting back into the car. I can't believe it either. This was not a fancy grocery store. This was just a normal grocery store. So do you think that's better than we were? And what about the sliding away in our schools? We used to be ahead in the education game. We educated more people to read, write, and do arithmetic. No more. Our schools are more likely to be teaching about gender identity and pushing your kids to do genital surgery than they are to be able to write or read. Forget the math. A couple years ago, before our elections in 2016, new math was put into the schools. Most of the parents didn't even read to find out what new math was. Well, let me tell you, I've never been a math genius. I admit it. I'm more into reading and writing, but I do know how to add and subtract, multiply, and divide. This new math was so complicated, I don't know how anybody was teaching it. It was stupid, just totally ridiculous. But it was to raise the grades, supposedly, of children who did not have access to the best schools because there was no parent choice of schools. Now, you can choose to send your children to a religious school, a private school, any kind of school. You can homeschool them, you can do anything, but that is ending. No school choice. Instead, your kids may live in a neighborhood and go back 40 years, 50 years, where they didn't have a choice of any school. Okay, so those are just two things: grocery prices and school. But what about the fuel for your car or the fuel for the East, where many of my listeners are, the Midwest and the East? How the heck, if you have retired or you've always needed help with personal expenses, how the heck are you going to stay warm this winter? You choose to heat or eat. That's not a funny slogan, to heat or eat. This is ridiculous. So all I'm asking you is two things. If you don't like this, stand up for your rights and speak out. Speak to your neighbors, your friends, your relatives, your children. Ask them to vote for who will make this country better. Now, this is not a presidential election, but it does speak to which party and their thoughts and ideals will rule the election of 2024. So it is very important, if you want to save America, think about it, study it, and express your opinion to your friends. This is a nonpartisan message to all of you. All right, I'm only interested in saving the United States for my grandkids, their friends, and my kids, and all of yours. Okay, let's skip over to COVID. Now, speaking of misinformation, I've been setting up on this, and there's a lot of misinformation here. First of all, some of the judges are getting smart and they're ruling against some of these crazy edicts that people want to put into law, saying that little kids 11 years old and younger, up to 6 months old, should be forced to take these vaccinations. First of all, there are no clinical studies behind these COVID injections. They're not vaccinations, and they do have altering medications in them. So I am saying study this also. You know, my tagline on my Judith Mancini Today is helping people and women particularly become healthy, wealthy, and wise. I sometimes forget the wise part of it when I'm trying to teach you about your health and alternative methods of staying healthy in your aging and staying active and having people on the show that are into finance and trying to explain all of that to you. I sometimes forget the wise part. And the wise part are the two things that I've just been speaking about today. Study. You don't have to have a laptop or a desktop computer. You can do this on your phones, and just about everybody has a smartphone these days. So you can Google it, do other research on other sites, and look at election news from both sides. Look at the COVID reports. No clinical studies on a vaccine that you're going to give to small children. It's ridiculous. When the Salk vaccine came out for the polio vaccine, one of the biggest things was it prevented transmission of polio. And why I'm so outspoken on vaccines is because my mother, which I don't often share with people, I'm sharing with you, my audience, because I love you all. My mother was a polio victim. Yes, victim, because the vaccine hadn't come out yet. And she got it, and she got the worst kind. My brother and I only got the virus, and we were well pretty fast. And we haven't had lasting effects from it, which some of my high school friends did. And some of my college friends did. But my mother became a quadriplegic and was in a respirator for the rest of her life. She started out in an iron lung, and one of my grandfathers was generous enough to send her back east to her family in Indianapolis. Now, we were not wealthy people, but we take care of our own as best we can. And she had nobody out here because my father decided to desert us because he didn't want an ill wife. Nice. We were dropped off at a grandparent, the same family, grandma and grandpa, who happened to be the parents of my father, strangely enough. We were just dropped off one day, me, a 5-year-old, and my brother, a 2-year-old. Moving forward, my mother never recovered from this, but she lasted a nice, wonderful life as much as possible when you're totally paralyzed and can't breathe on your own. And that's a whole nother story for you someday, as what she did with her life to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. But what I'm talking about now is the vaccine. Dr. Salk studied this, and he wanted to stop it because it was a worldwide pandemic. They still call it an epidemic in most places, but it was a pandemic. Worse, I think, than COVID because it had lasting effects. And now we're finding out that COVID has long COVID and some other effects also. But the problem with the vaccines are, and I will never take another one, I took the Johnson & Johnson, as did my husband, one shot in the arm. Okay, this does not prevent transmission of COVID. And so many people, I don't have the exact numbers with me today, but I will look them up for a future show. There are so many people who have had the vaccine and they've had boosters and they still have contracted COVID. This is not a preventative measure. It is not giving you safety from transmission. So what the hell is it doing? Pardon me for swearing. It's not doing anything except controlling you. And more companies are realizing that. You can see that the states that didn't have lockdowns for children in school, that went through school the whole time, did not get COVID because none of them were exposed to COVID. Everybody was doing the right thing at home, and these children did not all have vaccines. Most of them didn't have any, but they shut the schools down anyway, and they shut the entire country down to destroy us and our mental stability, our mental happiness, and to destroy our economy. Well, they did a pretty good job, didn't they? A girlfriend was coming up to visit me where I live now because the traffic is so bad in California. It takes us an hour and a half to visit each other. And I can't believe that I couldn't find a place for us to go to lunch. You may think that's a little crazy. Well, we wanted a sit-down restaurant. We didn't care if they served alcoholic beverages because we're both very busy during the day and we didn't even want a glass of wine. So I looked on the internet. I called some girlfriends that live up here, some couples that live up here. I couldn't find any restaurants open. All the ones we used to go to have shut down their lunch service. And why is that? Because people can't afford to go. They can't afford to pay their employees. Employees don't want to come back and work. People can't even hire them anymore. McDonald's is going in as 13 is the lowest they will pay you, and $21.50 if you qualify for different things. Flipping a hamburger, using the cash register, $21.50 for an entry-level job. How can people stay in business? So these people have chosen to close down for lunch, and they're trying to stay open for dinner. And my husband and I have tried to go out to a couple different ones just to get a sneaky snack for dinner. We don't always like to have a big meal at dinner because we're older and we're watching our weight, and we believe in eating during the day, not fasting all day long. So sometimes we're not that hungry. But these people have no business. How do they expect to stay in business? This is the most frightening time I've ever lived through. My grandparents lived through the Depression. And there comes, the story about walking to school in the snow with cardboard in your shoes. Well, there were people that did that. There were people who did that migration during the Dust Bowl, during the Depression era. This is not a funny time. But it is no time to be experimenting with your body. And I want you to read up on COVID vaccinations because there are many people who have died from these vaccinations, erroneously named vaccinations. And some of them are boys under the 23 and under. So I don't want you to lose your son. I think it's played with our mental stability, our pocketbooks, and everything else. So I'm going to keep on this show talking about COVID and doing research and how you can aid in your prevention of getting it. And I'll speak to that a little bit today. But in the meantime, let me put my glasses on so I can read my notes. I want to talk about COVID and how you want to extend your life and age gracefully and peacefully and have some excitement in your life, but you can't do it without good health. So while I'm talking about COVID, I just want to tell you that there are things that you can do. All the vitamins and minerals that you should take. I've spoken about that many times, but I just want to talk about some of the foods and things you should add into your diet that are natural and you can find at the grocery store or the health food store. One is licorice root. Whoever thought that? It's I can't even say what the name of this is. It's glycyrrhizin. I haven't taken it, but it did show an ability to help block the SARS coronavirus replication, and it's been shown to treat the early onset of a SARS infection or the coronavirus. The other thing is flavonoids, and flavonoids are a virus inhibitor, and they're found in things that you eat. Healthy fruits like very expensive blueberries, strawberries, fruits, and vegetables like that. Well, they didn't used to be so expensive, but now we're having to import them because our farmers can't plant them. So the chameleon plant is another one that has demonstrated antiviral activity against SARS coronavirus in vivo. So I think you should check all of these out at your local health food store. And also, why don't you check out Chinese traditional medicine? I think this is a remarkable thing for centuries that has gone on. And I will tell you, when my husband and I were in China, I had a terrible, terrible sciatic problem from an injury. And I'm not really into drugs, as you can tell. I don't believe in taking pain pills unless it's really necessary. And believe me, I know some people that are in chronic pain that they need something very strong. So I'm not saying that you can't use complementary medicine. But the Chinese medicine, he gave me some herbs, and I wish I had written down what they were. But they weren't hallucinogenic or anything like that. And they really did help my pain with that. So those are just some of the things you can take to help with COVID and help prevent it. And just ask at the local health food stores. A lot of stores have people in them now that have a natural health department, like Whole Foods is one of them. And that's accessible on Amazon. Everybody loves to use Amazon. Okay, so that's all of my dietary information for you today. But I want to also tell you about it's the time to review all of your things because it's coming up on the end of the year. And I will tell you, during COVID, I didn't go in for my mammogram. I didn't go in for a physical. It kind of was put by the wayside. But as you age, you can't enjoy life and try new things unless you're healthy. And I'm talking about chronic fatigue and some of those things that start to set in. You're not being mobile enough, so you're getting aches and pains. Now, there are real diseases like arthritis and all that do need to be helped. And God forbid that we have a stroke or a cardio event. But some of these can be prevented, perhaps, if we take better care of ourselves and we exercise and we take vitamins and supplements, because now you can't get enough. And believe me, there are people who can't even get enough food. So I don't know who is doing this, but I know during some emergencies in the United States, some vitamin and supplement people have gone into areas and given out, help people buy or obtain vitamins and supplements. So you can look into that. You know, churches always try to help people that are in dire needs. So get some help if you need it, because there are people out there now who planned for retirement, but their dollar isn't going as far. We're still close to $7 for gasoline per gallon in California. That's a big hit when you have to choose between filling your car up to go get that paycheck that is no longer covering your rent, your mortgage, and your food. So if you need help, go get it. There are people out there who will help you. Now is also the time when we are women of a certain age that you should review your Social Security and your Medicare benefits. Don't be ashamed or don't wait to take Social Security when you reach the age that you're eligible, because it's not a government subsidy. It came out of your paycheck. So don't be embarrassed. It's your money. And so is Medicare. You know, you put money into these things and you should get your fair share out. And that's why I'm speaking to it. There is no shame in getting your benefits. And I really, at this point, don't see the reason why wealthy people shouldn't get them either, because they paid into them also. And they give a lot of money to hospitals and doctors' funding and things like that. So if we're going to be as close as we are to socialized medicine, take advantage of it. There are all sorts of different plans. They're very confusing, believe me, because we take our share of it. And I prefer to choose my own doctor, not somebody who is necessarily in a certain plan, because I like to know my doctor. I like to see the same doctor, and I like to know what they're going to be telling me if I still prescribe to their thoughts as well as my own thoughts. So there's every plan from that to not having to, not being allowed to choose your own doctor, with enormously wonderful plans that are often related to educational universities, ones that are studying medicine and have hospitals and doctors and all in their plans. So I am not an expert on it. I will maybe see if I can get somebody to come on before the December 7th into open enrollment. I don't even understand that, to tell you the truth. So let me see if I can get an expert to come on about that. So with that being said, I want to talk a little bit about my plan to launch this Golden Years, Golden Fears platform, which ties into my Judith Mancini Today, because I want you to have a choice, and I want this to be wise for life, liberty, and happiness. I want to help you decide that you are not too old to do whatever you want. Whether you were in high school and wanted to be a cabinet maker, somebody who worked on cars, an auto mechanic, or you loved racing cars, or you wanted to be an artist, you wanted to be an architect, you wanted to be a nurse. All of these things used to be in high school and what they used to call trade schools. And yes, there's a man out there whose name I always forget, the dirty jobs guy. I don't know why I forget his name, but he has sort of brought back the interest in that. You should see some of the money that these people are making being a welder. We have a shortage of welders. Well, you need welders to work on Navy ships, to work on other things. There's a whole world of people out there who could go be trained and, I guess, certified, get a license, whatever you need to be a welder. There are people that can be plumbers, electricians. You can start your own business with those things. Nursing, look at us. We have a shortage of nurses, and look what our nurses did during the COVID pandemic. They were right there on the front lines, and they were there and they were working 24-hour shifts. A normal nurse's shift in a hospital is 12 hours, and many times you're asked to stay later. So there is nothing wrong with that. I am not in favor of everyone going to a 4-year university. Think what your skills are now. Think what you want to do or wanted to do out of high school or out of college, but you couldn't because getting married was a big deal for women back then. And I'm telling you, some of my friends got married right out of high school. Some waited 2 or 3 years. And then there are people like me who waited longer than that. That's no longer the case anymore. A lot of women are waiting a long time to find their mate because they're enjoying their life while they're young and they're traveling the world. And that's one thing you can do as a nurse. You can travel as a traveling nurse to many, many places. You can travel the world and find a job almost anywhere now with your laptop or your smartphone. And this is what people want to do when they retire, but you've got to be healthy. And so on my new platform, Golden Years, Golden Fears, I will keep telling you about health, and I will keep telling you about opportunities in different fields. We will explore what's interesting to you and your career, what you want to do next. Maybe you wanted to learn the guitar and sing folk songs or rock and roll. There are guys and girls that are out there doing this now, and they haven't started performing in public until their retirement or until the empty nest came or until they decided that maybe they couldn't travel the world anymore, so they wanted to settle down, but they still had that passion for playing music in the local gathering place. Or maybe they're going to be discovered and become the next Taylor Swift. You don't know. There is a resurgence of people singing songs from the 60s and even the 50s, and people are eating it up. They love it. So it's not too late to start a career in music or to become an artist. I have friends that are painting and selling their works, and they never had time to do this before, and they're passionate about it. And they've expanded their businesses from not just painting pictures, but doing greeting cards, stationery, calendars, designing these mugs and t-shirts and things like that. There is a wealth of interesting things you can do out there to make money if you want to make money, but there's also a dearth of things you can do to enjoy yourself and make your life more interesting. Now, what I want to do with this community of women of a certain age is to get a group of women of a certain age to convene via a Facebook group and a group of my own so that you can talk about what you want to do and talk about what you did in the past. Maybe you are a superstar knitting person and you want to teach a knitting class. I can help you do that. I can help you even make money at it if you'd like. But a lot of this stuff is coming back where women in the 50s had more leisure time. And all of us from the 60s either wanted to become a hippie and did a good job of it, or you wanted to go into the corporate world. So you wanted to get a 4-year degree. Maybe you wanted to become a teacher, a professor. Maybe you wanted to teach preschool. Maybe you wanted to get married and just have your own children. You wanted to raise them, and you found some way to work with the PTA and found out that you had really great organizational skills. Maybe you found out that when you were writing those flyers for the PTA, Parent Teacher Association, I don't know if they even speak to each other anymore. However, maybe you found out that you had a real skill for writing copy, and maybe you want to start doing things on the internet to write copy. There's all sorts of ways you can do this. You can explore some of these different job sites and see what they're looking for so you can work remotely or not work at all, because we do have liberty now because we have free time. We have free time unless we are taking care of aging parents. Now, that's a whole nother discussion. And another discussion is, how do you parent in your adulthood when you now are in your late 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond? How do you parent with your adult children and your grandchildren? You can't be in control anymore. So, how do you switch that around, and what do you do? And how does it affect? Some of you are taking care of aging parents, and some of you have children at home. Some of you have children in high school and college, or university, or your kids are just starting their first jobs, but you found you have to take care of your parents too. Fortunately, my daughter has not had to take care of us yet, but there will come a day when she may have to. And she got a taste of it when we went on family vacation to Mexico a couple weeks ago, a month ago or so. And you need to step back and watch your children now parent. And hopefully they learned a lot from you, and they learned communication skills and parenting skills. And I'm happy to say that my daughter is a great parent, and so is her husband. So I hope she did get a little of that from me. But I know also she didn't only get it from my good side, she got it from my mistake side, because I did make some mistakes, biggest ones being not married to people that were good parents. So I'm married to a man now who has, for 27 years, 28 years, embraced my children, and he looks at them as his own. And that is quite something for a woman who's remarried. And some of you out there are remarried and have combined families and everything else. I always say I'm fortunate that he didn't have any children, but he has been there for the ups and downs of my children. And I would have had a very difficult time surviving the death of my son if my husband hadn't been there. And he's been a wonderful stepfather to my daughter, and she loves him dearly. And both my kids were in their 20s when I remarried 27 years ago. So this is saying a lot. When you're in your 50s and now you have a family with other women, with your woman's children, or vice versa, your husband's children, it's difficult, but not that difficult if you have love in your heart. So I'm going to be addressing all of this. And soon, when I get this website up and get going and ready to launch, I'll let you know, because we're going to do other fun things in it too. Because there are a lot of single women of a certain age out there who would still love to date. They would still love to travel. They don't have anybody to date, and they don't have anybody to travel with. So we're going to be putting together events, not just events where you will be educating yourselves with speakers who will talk about everything from health to wealth to traveling the world, whatever your interest is. So those will not be political times, but you might find like-minded women in these groups. I think you'll enjoy being in them. What I'm aiming to do is to not replace, but add to some of the business networking groups out there. It seems that most of the networking groups are aimed at business for 40-year-old women and above. So I am trying to help you by putting this group together that will enhance your life so that you will have life, liberty, and happiness. And that's our aim. And we'll have some virtual things, virtual events, as well as in-person events. I'm hoping to team up, and I will let you know shortly when we get launched, with a wonderful travel agency that will be helping with these events for traveling and all. And I'm hoping to travel not just in the United States, but hoping that we get rid of travel restrictions on all of that to more exotic places, like maybe to Tahiti, maybe to Indonesia, maybe to Bali, maybe to Mexico, maybe to South America, to Argentina, maybe to go down the Amazon, maybe to go on river cruises through the European countries. Maybe we'll just go to New York and have a blast going to a wonderful musical or show on stage, which so many people in the country have never been able to do. Maybe they've had their community theater, but maybe they've never had the time, the energy, or the money to go and travel to New York and live it up. So we will be doing all of this. I hope to have some doctors on that will tell you about integrative health, complementary health, allopathic health, and even things to plump up your face, which, since my muscles in my face fell from so much crying over my son, I think I could use a little Botox or filler. And I'm not ashamed to tell you that I will do it at my age. So if you have the resources and you feel you need it, there is nothing wrong with that. Plastic surgery was even done in the 40s and 50s, where people didn't know it was being done for these movie stars. Oftentimes they would go to these outstanding surgeons in Mexico or South America and have it done. And nobody here knew that they were doing that. So I believe there is nothing wrong with wanting to look your best and feel your best. And that's what I'm going to help you do. I'm hoping to turn those golden years into real golden years and get rid of those golden fears where it's difficult for you to pay your rent or heat and eat or whatever. And believe me, when I wanted to launch this golden years, golden fears, the country was not like this. It was not in the throes of a recession like we're heading for, or the inflation that we're already having here in the United States. And we will go into all of those subjects that we want to cover in that group. So it will be virtual videos, but it will be in person also. And there will be a blog to review everything that we've talked about on Judith Mancini Today. And we will share all of our information that we get, because believe me, I'm excited about it and I feel great. But I know I haven't taken care of myself properly in the last year because of my son, who, for those of you who don't know, took his life a week from today, last year. And it pretty much destroyed me and my daughter. And we're just now trying to get back into the throes of life and take care of others and get the happiness back in our life, but never forget her brother or my son. So I will talk about that, and that leads me into what I'm going to do on November 17th. But first, next week on my show, I did post a show, I think it was last week or maybe the week before, where I said, who am I when I am not me anymore? And several people thought I was talking about dementia or Alzheimer's, or not being able to move from some debilitating disease or cancer or something like that. But that was not what I was talking about. I was talking about retirement and empty nesters and things like that. But that got me thinking about people who do have parents or siblings, friends who are entering early stages of Alzheimer's or dementia. And I am going to interview this wonderful woman whom a girlfriend of mine introduced me to, who has written a book on taking care of her mother during dementia. And it goes through the stages, and some of it's hard to listen to, some of it's hard to read. It's an easy to read book. Some of you will get a chuckle out of it because you know the different stages of this and what happens, and some of you will cry. I found it very informative because I've never had anybody in my family, thank God, who suffered from dementia or Alzheimer's. So I only know what friends tell me and how difficult it is and how it could be a slow death that you are kind of going through with them because it's breaking your heart. So that will be next week. It'll give you a chuckle too as we go through it. But the following week is the 1 year, I don't even know what to call it, anniversary of my son taking his life. And I know how distraught I was because I postponed even launching my new podcast. I've been podcasting for over 8 years now, but I changed the format a couple times. And I was going to relaunch just before he did this. And I had to postpone it. And thank God I work with the best team and podcast stations, Dean Piper and my engineer. Dean Piper is the owner, and Juan Garcia is my engineer through them. I work with the best, and I had to keep postponing this week by week. And sometimes I'd start and I couldn't finish the show, and I'd break down in tears. And they were with me every step of the way. And they are still with me every step of the way, thank God. So I discussed it with my engineer this morning, and I'll discuss it with Dean too. I just don't know if I will be able to do a show on the 17th because I'm planning on thinking and praying a lot that day. But if I am up to it, I am going to do a show on the 17th of November about the scourge of suicide in this country. And it has started so young. And here's just a side bar for you. My kids went to private school because I worked hard to be able to do that for them and give them a wonderful education. And from the time that they graduated, I counted up until they were in their mid-20s, how many of the young men in these schools and other schools, not just these two schools that they went to, because they went to different schools. My daughter went to an all-girls school, and my son went to an Episcopal school. And I was watching, and I would see things on the news about these kids committing suicide. And I couldn't believe it. And I counted up recently 7 people that we knew. They were all young men that committed suicide. And I don't know why. Some of them OD'd because kids were getting into terrible drugs at that time. And I'm not talking about something like marijuana. I'm talking about, God forbid, why they would do LSD after they found this mind-altering thing that hit in the 60s. But they would get into stronger things, and it was terrible. And kids are still doing this, and that's why fentanyl is taking so many lives. They're getting into very dangerous drugs. So I only have a couple minutes left, and I do want to talk about, Juan, could you tell me how many minutes I have in the private chat, please? I do want to talk about suicide. Whether I'll be able to do it on Thursday, November 17th, I don't know. It will depend on how I feel. So that is what's coming up with that. And thanks, Juan. And then the following week is Thanksgiving, and we're not in studio on Thanksgiving, so I'm going to have a replay done of a very uplifting, fun show, and I will wish you happy Thanksgiving today. I love you all for tuning in. I want nothing but happiness for you and joy in your hearts. So remember, cherish yesterday, dream tomorrow, and live today. Thank you.